The sun set over the quiet neighborhood, but beneath its tidy streets and manicured lawns lay the iron grip of the HOA. James Callahan, a tall man with calm eyes and the kind of presence that filled a room, had recently moved into the community with his family. What the HOA didn't know, what no one knew, was that James wasn't just another homeowner. He was the chief of police for the county. At first, James ignored the HOA's letters, petty complaints about his mailbox paint being slightly faded, his car parked 2 inches past the curb, or his teenage son's basketball hoop near the driveway. Just noise, James muttered. But when the third warning came with a threat of fines and further action, his instincts stirred. Something felt off. Neighbors whispered about the HOA president, Greg Simmons, a man who ran the board like a dictator. People said he had friends in law enforcement, though no one had ever seen a single badge. One evening, as James was grilling on the back porch, a black SUV with tinted windows slowed in front of his house. 2 men inside stared for 2, long before driving away. James's gut told him this wasn't the usual HOA drama. His career had taught him one thing: when intimidation starts, escalation follows. At midnight, James heard pounding on his front door. His wife jolted awake, clutching the blanket. Their teenage kids rushed into the hallway, eyes wide with fear. Through the peephole, James saw 2 men in tactical vests, flashing badges that glimmered under the porch light. One shouted, "Open up! By order of the HOA Enforcement Unit!" James nearly laughed, but his training kept him serious. HOA Enforcement Unit? There was no such thing. He noticed their belts. Cheap knockoff. Holsters, no department insignia. Still, to an untrained eye, they might look official. James opened the door a crack. "Who are you with?" he asked calmly. The taller man barked, "County Police! You're under arrest for repeated violations of HOA bylaws." He thrust a paper forward, stamped with a fake seal. James studied their posture. The sloppy stance, the nervous twitch in the shorter man's eyes. "You boys picked the wrong house," he said softly before slamming the door shut. His wife's voice trembled. "James, what is going on? Are they real?" "No," he replied, "but they're trying to look like it, and that means Simmons has crossed the line." The officers banged a few more times, then left when no one answered. But James knew this wasn't over. If the HOA was willing to send fake police, the game had turned dangerous. The next morning, James wore his uniform to work, but not before checking his street cameras. Sure enough, the SUV had circled his block twice during the night. At the station, he confided in his deputy, Carla. "The HOA sent imposters to my house," he said. "They had badges, fake warrants, the works." Carla's eyes widened. "That's impersonating law enforcement. Federal crime." "Exactly," James nodded. "But I want them to try again. We'll be ready." That evening, James deliberately parked his squad car in the garage, leaving no hint of his position. He wanted them to think he was vulnerable. He warned his family, "If they show up again, stay upstairs, I'll handle it." Sure enough, around 11 p.m., the black SUV reappeared. This time, 3 men stepped out, wearing full tactical gear. They marched toward his porch with the confidence of men who thought they owned the law. James quietly reached under the couch, retrieving his badge and sidearm. He switched off the living room light and waited in silence. The pounding began again, louder than before. "James Callahan, you are under arrest for defying HOA law." James opened the door slowly, his face calm. "Really? And who exactly do you work for?" The leader smirked. "Special enforcement. You'll know soon enough." He grabbed for James's arm. That's when James flipped his badge into the porch light. "Chief of Police, county jurisdiction, and you 3 are under arrest for impersonating officers." The men froze. Their cocky grins vanished. This is a mistake," one stammered. But James was already moving, pulling his weapon low and steady. "Hands where I can see them. Now." His neighbor's porch lights flicked on one by one, people peeking out as the commotion grew. James's deputy, Carla, appeared from the shadows, followed by 2 patrol cars that had been parked down the street all along. Within seconds, the fake officers were face down on the pavement, handcuffed and cursing. Greg Simmons, the HOA president, came stumbling out of his house across the street, yelling, "You can't do this! They work for me!" James's voice boomed through the night. "Greg Simmons, you just admitted to employing men who impersonated law enforcement. You're going to jail, too." News spread like wildfire. By morning, the HOA's reputation was in ruins. Headlines screamed, "HOA hires fake cops to intimidate residents. Chief of police exposes plot." At a packed town meeting, terrified homeowners confronted Greg, Simmons's allies. "You let him turn this place into a dictatorship," one woman cried. James stood at the podium, still in uniform. "The HOA is meant to serve the community, not bully it. What happened here will not happen again." The board voted unanimously to dissolve Greg's presidency and place the HOA under state review. Weeks later, James sat in court as Greg and his hired officers faced charges: impersonating law enforcement, conspiracy, harassment, and attempted unlawful detention. Greg tried to weasel out, claiming he only wanted to enforce order. But the judge wasn't moved. "Order does not come through fear," she said sternly. Greg was sentenced to prison. The imposters, facing lighter sentences, confessed everything: how Greg paid them under the table, how he promised protection from friends in high places. James's testimony sealed the case. Justice had prevailed. Months passed, and the neighborhood began to heal. The fear was gone. Families gathered in the park again. Children rode bikes freely, and the shadow of Greg Simmons no longer lingered. James, though, remained watchful. His instincts never turned off. He often walked the streets at night, not as chief of police, but as a neighbor ensuring safety. One evening, an elderly woman approached him. Her hands trembled as she pressed a small tin of cookies into his hands. "Thank you, Chief," she whispered. "You saved us from living in fear." James smiled softly. "You don't owe me anything. Just take care of each other." Standing under the streetlight, he looked at the once intimidating neighborhood and felt a quiet pride. The HOA had tried to break him with fake authority, but in the end, the truth stood taller than intimidation, and as long as James Callahan lived here, no one would ever misuse power again. Hook ending line. Because sometimes the real law has to remind the fake one where justice truly belongs.